about that. We can talk about, the NAEP, the national scores came out recently, and they're pretty much in the tank. So, we can talk about that too.
What is the organization that puts out the national scores?
The NAEP, N-A-E-P.
N-A-E-P.
So they call it the NAEP.
And how much have they changed since the 70s?
Since the 70s, I don't know. I haven't looked at it back then. I just know over the last 15, 20 years, they've been pretty stagnant. They really haven't moved. And if anything, they're kind of ticking down a little bit.
We're rolling.
Okay.
Marie Banfield.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Grant Discourse. I've wanted to get you on here for a while because over the last year, there's been a lot of changes in New Hampshire as far as education goes. Mm-hmm. We've had the expansion of the EFAs and the passing of the Parental Bill of Rights and all of that. And you are an education advocate. What exactly would you call your full title for what you do?
Essentially what I do is I research education, and then I take that and I advocate for parental rights and excellence in education, whether it be homeschooling, private schools, public schools, but I mainly focus on public schools.
And do you work with any other organizations directly?
Oh, sure. There's an organization called Defending Education, I think it's called. Anybody that's really involved in education, even Moms for Liberty, they've really come onto the scene in terms of backing parents, that are taking issues to the school. So, anybody that's involved with anything like that, there's been challenges to books that are in the schools. And I tend to help parents navigate those situations. When they contact me, it's not normally, I have to pull my kid out of school or something like that. I'll get contacted by parents and they'll say, I'm having a problem with this. Or somebody said, call Marie Banfield, I have a problem with this. And so we try to figure out, how best to approach this. So I'll, give them some ideas on strategies. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll meet with administrators with them. Sometimes I'll attend school board meetings and speak at school board meetings. There's so many different things that we'll do, but normally it's advice, like how to navigate these things. Because, teachers have unions that stick up for them if there's a problem, and parents don't have a whole lot of people out there. And if they find a parent advocate, normally they charge, for something, and I don't charge. I've never charged anybody anything.
Really?
No, in 20 years, I have never made a dime off of anything. No, it just, I started researching education really for my own kids back when they were young, and I really wanted to choose good schools, and I really wanted to know what was going on so I could navigate their education. And I learned so much, I've researched so much that I've got a lot of information in my head. So a lot of times teachers, school board members, parents, they won't understand something that's going on in their school. And they'll call me and I'll explain, here's where this is coming from. Maybe it's coming from the federal government. Maybe it's coming from a grant organization pumping money into your school, and then they require you to do A, B, and C. And you may have a problem with A, B, and C, but you had no idea that this was required from a grant organization funding your school. So, I connect the dots for a lot of people.
A grant organization?
Yes.
So the school gets money from the federal government?
Yes.
And then they have to abide by certain rules?
Yes.
What are some of the rules that you've had to encounter where people have had a problem?
Well, curriculum is one of the big things, or maybe teaching practices, teaching methods that they use in the classroom. The curriculum a lot of times is dumbed down, or it's, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Common Core. It's dumbed down, academics standards, so that translates into dumbed down curriculum. People are probably familiar with Common Core math, which is confusing, convoluted, and quite frankly has failed our kids in many ways. So a lot of times they'll say, my kids don't understand, they don't get this, I can't help them. And so my advice to them is always, if you're going to put your kid in a public school and you're going to subject them to this garbage, you might want to get a tutor because they're not going to, really have a great foundation in math without that. Some kids could thrive. Some, might be gifted in math. Some kids may be able to overcome some of this, but your average kids really can struggle with Common Core math. For instance, the ways most of us learned math was the traditional way. You learned one way to multiply, one way to divide, one way to add, and one way to subtract. And now they call them strategies. So now we're going to teach your kids multiple ways to multiply. And so what ends up happening is these kids get very confused. They never master the traditional ways that we've learned. And so when they get to high school math, they're confused. So they're trying to work these, algebra problems and, calculus problems and things like that. And they've never really mastered the traditional long division that we learned as kids. And so now they're faced with the inability to work higher level math problems. And the teachers a lot of times in high school will be like, well, do I need to go back and reteach you what you should have learned in, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade? And so a lot of times I connect the dots for parents to say, this is what's going on. Then you also have, sometimes you'll have grant foundations come in and say, we're going to give you grant money. But if we give you grant money, your teachers have to sit on the sidelines, and we're going to use a different teaching method, which is like discovery learning. So they do little bit of teaching, and more of the kids are collaborating and they're working together trying to figure out a problem, which can be a lesson in frustration when you're talking about math problems. And so, you'll get a lot of kids who are very frustrated. You see behavior problems. The teacher's no longer in front of the class teaching, but they're all kind of working in groups in this classroom, and they're wondering why behavior is an issue, because it's chaos. It's a chaos. It's atmosphere. So again, a lot of times I'll get calls from parents, and I'll be like, ask your child this. Put your child on the phone. Let's ask your child what's going on in the classroom, because they don't understand it. They can't figure out why there's issues going on. And so, I'll go back to, okay, here's the root cause of what's going on. And then a lot of times we'll try to figure out how to rectify that situation. Sometimes it could be, I had a friend, and I think she was in Merrimack, and I said, take your kids to the Russian School of Math down in Nashua. It's a private tutoring center. And as soon as her daughter started there, after school, not during school, after school, she was just raving about it, because it's not rocket science. It's basic math that we learned when we were kids. They simplify it, make it easy to understand, and they actually teach. So you're not left to discover math on your own. You are taught by somebody who makes it easy to understand and teaches you math the way it should be taught.
The Common Core math, that's the same as new math.
Yes, it's very similar, yes.
So there's a difference between those two?
Well, back in the 90s, we had the new math, which was also called reform math.
'Cause I never heard new math until probably the last 5 years.
Yeah, and so we were hoping that would be, when they came up with, we're going to do a national standards Common Core, we were hoping that they would get rid of all of that and just go back to traditional math. And they didn't. They just kind of incorporated it in to the Common Core. And so we, many of us who had been researching and looking at this knew that this is going to be a problem. Now, not only are we seeing this in some states, now we're going to see it nationwide, and we have. And so our national scores reflect that nothing has really improved in terms of academics. We can look at our national scores in the NAEP and determine, the scores just came out recently, and it was not good. We're not improving, and that means that there's about 25 countries that are doing better than the United States. Now, that's on an international test. But our scores are not improving. We haven't elevated education, public education primarily. Common Core started in 2010. We're in 2025, so 15 years. we've basically done nothing to improve public education in this country. And then if you're in a private school that uses this, you're paying for this garbage.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought that the Bush administration pushed it forward, but it didn't start getting implemented until 2010.
2010, that was under Obama. So Bush was No Child Left Behind, and that was state. Each state had their own academic standards that they developed.
Okay.
And then after that, we saw some states that went above and beyond, did fantastic, and then you saw some states that didn't do very well and did making up their standards. So the decision was made, we need national standards. And instead of taking what we knew to be the best, they pretty much picked from the middle to the lower end, and that's what we ended up nationally with.
Well, what do they think was going to happen if they did that?
I guess they thought it would help, but after 15 years, everybody can pretty much admit it didn't work.
So the NAEP, NAIP?
NAEP.
NAEP?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I remember looking into the NAEP last year because they were putting out scores. But when you go on their website, I find it very confusing to even figure out how to, where do they get, when you look at their data, I mean, somebody like me, I don't know what I'm looking at. So what does somebody do that wants to educate themselves on NAEP and national scores and just how the education structure, the progress of it is going? Because I think it was implemented in the 70s when the creation of the Department of Education came out.
Right. So there's three basically sets of tests. There is a state test. That's the SAS, SAS. And then in the high school, they use the SAT for the high school test. So you have a state test, and they'll look at those scores. And then they'll determine who's doing the best in the state in terms of each school district. Then you have a national test, which is the NAEP. And now the NAEP will score by state. So how is New Hampshire doing compared to California or Indiana or something like that? And then you have international tests, and there's basically two at the international level. There's a PISA, PISA, and there's the TIMSS test, which is TIMSS. And the TIMSS test is really the one that I always say, this is the one to watch. Because the TIMSS test is in science and math, and it scores the countries. And like I said, we're about in the 25th ranking. You have Russia, you have Singapore, you have Japan, you have the Asian countries way above us. And so those are the tests that you look at. So when you're looking at the NAEP, again, this is a national test. It would be just for the United States, and then they score it by state. So when you go into the NAEP website, you can go to New Hampshire, and you're not going to probably find each school district, but you'll look at how New Hampshire is doing. How are we doing as a state? How have we moved that bar? Well, we've essentially not moved it. It might tick up a point. It might tick down a point, but it's not moved since, especially since Common Core, we haven't moved it in any significant direction upwards. So that, you can tell that just by looking at the NAEP. And if you want to compare us to other states, New Hampshire doesn't do too bad on the NAEP. We have a demographic in the state that it does help that we don't have big metropolitan cities. So, when you have that in other states, maybe like in Illinois, you have Chicago schools. Well, the Chicago schools are terrible. They're going to bring down the whole entire state. So it does help that we don't have that kind of demographic in our state. So I think that's what helps elevate our scores. Our scores are probably better than most states because we have a lot of English-speaking population. And, going back to Common Core Math is very language focused. And I always tell people this. I've even told elected officials, I've told mayors this. I said, your Common Core Math sets you up to fail if you are, a city school with English language learners, because, it's not just about being able to compute. you also have to explain why does 2 + 2 = 4. And so if you are learning the language, you have to now communicate that on a math test. So you might be getting something wrong, not because you don't know the math either. You may not know how to communicate the math. And so for those states and those cities, maybe Manchester, Nashua, Concord, where maybe they have a large, especially Manchester, they have a large population of, immigrant children that don't maybe speak the language. They may be brilliant in math, but they're not going to do well on this math test because it's so language-based. And that's a problem. And this is a problem that has been identified by mathematicians who have compared what are we teaching in the United States compared to what are we teaching in Russia. And so you look at the Russian math programs, and I have, and because I follow these mathematicians and I know some of them because I've worked with them in the past. They'll show, like I've seen them do presentations on how they teach math in Russia, for instance. Very little language. You can see, a stack of 5, let's say 5 pencils. Another stack of 5 pencils, and you can see, okay, that's 5 + 5, and then you come up with 10. You don't have to explain any of that, and so it really takes a toll on American students to have to move away. Like some of the math professors have explained it as we're not paying as much attention on computation as we are on communication. So they're not focused on computation skills, and then when they get older, they're not able to perform math at the level of a Singapore student who knows math like the back of their hand. They've memorized the algorithms. They know how to sit down and do a long division problem, and they don't miss anything because they've been forced to memorize math facts, those kind of things. They haven't been having to struggle with explaining how some of these math problems work. And so there's just an overemphasis on that. There's And it's highly criticized. Steve Wilson from Johns Hopkins did a report for Fordham Foundation years ago about this problem, this exact problem. And if you look at some of the math programs out there, you'll see it. You'll see that, because a lot of parents don't understand what is going on. Why can't my kid do math? And so if you don't explain some of this, they're not going to understand that I tell them, well, your kid's been set up to fail. And that's really what it boils down to. They're not learning good quality math. And if you want them to learn good quality math, you better work with your kids, or you better get a tutor to teach them real math. And then if you do that K-8, hopefully by high school, they're able to overcome what the other kids have had to deal with.
Who came up with with this Common Core math?
So they gathered together. This was back in like 2008, 2009. They gathered committees, and the head of the Common Core Math Committee was a math professor. His name is Jason Zimba. And so on this committee, they looked at standards and they put the standards together. But when you're on a committee and you've got all these people that are saying, well, we really want these kids to go in depth, and we really want these kids to understand all this stuff, and you don't have somebody who maybe has compared and really looked at what other countries are doing, like Singapore or Japan, and you don't have that kind of knowledge, then and you're kind of looking at state standards, and some of them are pretty terrible, some of them are pretty good, and you're just trying to put something together as a committee. Sometimes you have to make concessions, and I believe that's what happened. On the validation committee, there was also a validation committee that looked at the standards after they were not while they were finalized, but while they were being drafted. And so I knew some of the people that were on the Common Core Validation Committee, James Milgram being one. He's a math professor out of Stanford. Sandra Stotsky, she's an English professor out of Massachusetts. And they sat on the validation committee. Well, at that time, fortunately for me, I happened to be on a forum with math professors around the country. Milgram was on it, Stotsky was on it, and they were communicating via email. So I was on this with them, and so I could watch what they were talking about while they were doing this. And what was really interesting, because they were very instrumental in their own states to develop their own standards. Like Milgram developed the California standards when we just had state standards. Sandra Stotsky developed the English standards when she was in Massachusetts. So they knew how to do state standards well because their states were considered the best in the country. So while they're on the validation committee, they're looking at how this is going. And they had to sign like this form that basically said, you're not going to share information. Well, that was one of the big red flags because they had been on these state committees and everything was public.
They're not going to share information?
Yeah, that whatever you see and going on, you can't share this information. You have to sign this document. And so they would only share with us what they were allowed to share. But you could tell that was a problem for them because they were, they had done this in their own states. Nothing was private. This is public. And so after it was all said and done, after they came up with the final, and they were able to give their feedback, they gave their feedback on what they felt was, not well done. But still what they came up with was basically mediocrity. And both of them refused to sign off on these standards. Now, again, there was a few of them on each of these committees, these validation committees, but they were two that said, absolutely not. This is not worth doing. This is not good enough. And so they refused to sign off on them. So they were against them from day one. So like I said, having access to both of them, like I did interviews with them. I had a couple, Sandra Stotsky, because she's in Massachusetts, she would come up and we would do speaking engagements together. Milgram's out in California. I would pipe him in. We didn't have podcasts back then in 2010. But we do, something similar to this. And I interviewed him many times to get he's a Stanford, NASA one of the most brilliant mathematicians in this country. And he's saying, this is good. So go back to Jason Zimba, the lead writer of the Common Core Math. He was at a interview or something. He was doing something with Sandra Stotsky, and she asked him. She said, you can go look at it. It's on YouTube. She asked him. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here. The math standards are not like up to par as where they should be if you want to go on to a STEM career. STEM program in our top colleges, like engineering, Stanford. That's one of the top engineering schools. You're not going to get into Stanford. You are not going to get into these schools if we follow Common Core Math. And Jason Zimba basically said, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. He said this is not what most parents aspire to for their kids. So we just basically handed them mediocrity. In this country, where we spend so much money and we have so many resources compared to these other countries that are just kicking our butt.
Yeah, I think the largest portion of my tax bill is education. Mm-hmm. And that's where most people feel it.
Yes.
How was it changed from Common Core with other categories as far as like social studies or language arts?
So Common Core is math and English.
Just math and English.
Math and English. But then we also have national standards in science, and they're called the Next Generation Science Standards. So we have those. They're like the Common Core of science, and they're pathetic.
And that's national.
Those are national standards too, and they're worse than Common Core.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at them. I've read them. I've looked at what science experts have, analyzed them, and they've said these are actually worse than the Common Core Math.
When was it implemented?
That was after Common Core. So Common Core came in 2010. I think the Next Generation Science Standards, I can't remember the year, but I want to say around maybe 2014, something like that. I went through them and I highlighted the problems with them, and I sent it to our State Board of Education. I actually need to redo that because we have several new board members on there. I want them to read my critique, which I gathered a lot of information from like science biology professors. So, it's not my personal critique, although you can look and you can see the problems. For instance, in the science standards, there, as you can probably imagine, there's a political component to them. Like there's a focus on population reduction.
Really?
Yes. There's a focus on limiting, I think I want to say property rights.
Really?
Yes. I'll send it to you. Maybe
Can you pull this right up online?
Yeah, I think it's on Granite Grok. And I think if you pull up Granite Grok and then you pull up, so granitegrok, I think it's .com, and then you pull up that website and then you put in NGSS and my name, and you should be able to find the actual letter that I sent to the State Board of Education in New Hampshire. And I also sent it to some of the people on the House Education Committee. So if you pull that up, let's see. Okay, so see where it says a call for Democrat Rep. Lanu to support quality and politically unbiased science standards.
That one?
Just pull that one up. Yeah, it's in there. I basically called him or called him out and said, why aren't you guys supporting these quality standards? So if you can see what I wrote to him, and then I think below that, yes, there's my letter to the State Board of Education on the next generation science standards. So it's a little long, but it's a full listing of where the problems are with the next generation science standards. So there's elements that are missing in science. So if you do the next generation science centers, you may not be teaching kids all the science that they need to learn, things like that. The focus on, of course, global warming or something, of course, that's in there. And I highlight it and I give you direct links to where to find all this in the standards themselves. And then I give you direct links to some of the people who wrote up these critiques on the NGSS, like Stan Metzenberg, PhD professor of biology at California State University. He prepared an analysis of the NGSS when they were under consideration in Massachusetts. So, it's not necessarily coming directly from me, although I have identified some of the things as you'll read in there, but you can also read his critique of the NGSS when they were under consideration in Massachusetts. And he basically says, here's the problems, and you can look at the list. I think I listed them too, like physics, science. Yeah. So physical science is omitted, including Newton's first law of energy, thermodynamics. You can now I didn't determine that, but him being a professor of science went through and figured out, oh, you guys didn't include this, or oh, you didn't do this.
The scientific method is absent?
Yes.
Wow.
So unless you have a teacher that is filling in those gaps, or that has identified that something's missing and said, oop, I better bring this into the classroom, then it's very quite likely that whatever your school chose to use to teach kids science, it's going to be severely flawed.
Empirical evidence, which is good. Empirical evidence means real, observable relationships and data. Models are not empirical evidence. There is a conflict between science and overuse of models based on empirical evidence. When there is a reinforcement of possible errors, there is a real potential to create incorrect conclusions, which errors are reinforced year after year through NGSS. Those errors will be hard to correct when the student becomes adult. This is especially concerning for those looking at the bias in the disciplinary core ideas of human sustainability, weather, and climate.
Yes. So Judith Curry, for instance, she's a climatologist and former chair of the School of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences. So, she's obviously an outspoken critic of some of these, climate kind of crisis kind of things. And and she, if you don't know about her and you don't know about her criticisms, then you're just going to teach it point blank without understanding that this is not an exact science. Climate change or global warming.
They're basing it off of models.
Right. And that would play into also the math. You're not getting quality math instruction, and now you're coming into science and you're going into things like physics or chemistry. Well, good luck. Good luck with chemistry if you don't have a solid foundation in math. So that's the other issue, is that the science is going to be difficult to learn for these kids because you didn't give them a good solid foundation in math either.
This political theme goes on throughout NGSS by requiring middle school students to understand how to apply scientific principles to design a method for monitoring and minimizing a human impact on the environment. Construct an argument supported by evidence for how increases in human population and per capita consumption of natural resources impact Earth systems. So this sounds like it's got kind of a globalist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can see that, it's not just about be good stewards of the earth, and I bring that up. Like if they were just, which we should all be good stewards of the earth. If that was the messaging, that would be one thing. But the messaging is very different. So you see how I highlight property rights.
Yeah, even property rights are under attack by the NGSS. If human beings are the problem, property rights must also be restricted and possibly eliminated. Urban planning. So this comes out of like the UN 2030.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So that's,
sustainable development.
Sustainable development. Yes. And it doesn't jump out. You have, if you know what to look for, like you would know what to look for in this, you would be able to draw this out. But if you're just an average mom out there or average dad and not really paying that close attention to this, okay, this might not sound so crazy, but if you understand the sustainable goals and you understand population control and you understand how they're going to kind of mold and shape the mind of a child to make it look like these horrible humans and the impact that they have on the earth, it's a subtle indoctrination. It's a subtle message to them that, maybe we need to do other things like restrict property rights, or, you can see that when you read through this, but you can also see it if you read through the NGSS, it'll start to jump out at you. But I wanted to put something together that really explained it and then connect it to the actual, like you see that link right there. That's a link directly to the science standards. So these are the science standards for, let's see, Earth and human activity. So go read them yourself.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a standard for our science in our schools.
When you read through some of the white papers that are on the WEF website and even the UN's website, they sound very boring. They're tough to read. So I don't think a lot of people do.
Right.
And when you have something like what we saw during 2020, where you have members of the World Economic Forum and some of the videos that they put out that talk about sustainable development in the future and what it's going to look like, and they put it in a video, they do make it sound not very threatening, not very controlling, but they just make it sound like this is just what it's going to be like.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2030. You'll know nothing.
Or the human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights. If you look at, I think it's number, I always get the number wrong. It's either like 24 or 26. All of our decisions have to go through the UN. Everything looks so good because it's all about human rights. But then, in order to have those human rights, it's got to be approved by them. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a tyrannical message anyway. So it's like the Declaration of Human Rights by the UN is a tyrannical document if you agree to number 26 or whatever it says at that. So, yeah, you're looking at it and you're looking at something like this and you're like, okay, well, some of this doesn't sound so bad until you realize that what's the message you're giving to these kids? It's not about taking care of the earth and being good stewards. It's how bad are these people that are being born. And, maybe we need to limit the population somehow. I mean, it's all of that kind of mantra.
There's a lot of people that think that.
Yes.
Everyday people.
Yes.
And I didn't realize how much this was already in our school system.
Yes, it is.
That's pretty eye-opening.
It is.
And that came in 2014.
I want to say 2014. I could be wrong on that year. Maybe that letter will have the actual date of when I wrote it. I think I might have put that on. So if you go back to the Granite Grok thing, but yeah, what year does it say?
As of March 2023, 20 states have adopted it.
Yeah, not in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, it was way before that. It's been around for at least a decade. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but it's a problematic document, and it's not high quality. It's just not high quality. It's
2013.
Okay,
yeah,
that was close.
It was released April of 2013.
Yep.
Many states are expected to adopt them within 1 to 2 years. However, according to the New York Times, it will take several more years to actually develop curricula based on the new guidelines, to train teachers in implementing them, and to revise standardized tests.
Yeah, most people have no idea this is going on.
And New Hampshire already has it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. We've been using it for many years. So I'll look at the curriculum. I'll go back and I'll look at, what are we using in our classrooms? And then, I'll go look at some of the programs and, I can see problems with it. But most people would not catch that because they don't understand what's in the standards to begin with.
Now, what are the reactions that you get from everyday people when you tell them about this?
No, they're not happy. They're not happy. No, but nobody's really happy. I mean, some of the people who are political would love this. Some people who believe in this political agenda or political ideology, they love this. So they're not going to have a problem with it. But everybody else looks at this and goes, wow. But nobody seems to want to do anything about it.
Do they think there's nothing that can be done about it?
Well, this would have to come from the state. This would have to come from the State Board of Education, the commissioner, and the governor all together. You really need a governor to lead this. And this is why we still have it, because Governor Sununu is not willing to do anything about this.
How about Kelly Ayotte?
I don't know. I'm hoping that she will. I did ask her about, like the Common Core when she was running for office. And, I brought up the fact that in Florida, the Governor DeSantis, did rewrite their academic standards. I know one of the people who helped on that endeavor. And I did talk to him about it when he was running for president. And they did improve their academic standards. Now, are they perfect? Are they going to be up to par with maybe Singapore? I don't know about that, but I know that at least they did something. But it takes a governor, because you have to be able to lead, and you have to be able to withstand the political backlash. People are perfectly fine with mediocrity. People are perfectly fine with this political agenda in their science standards. So you're going to get some people that are going to say, what do you mean you're going to change the standards? Do you know what we have to do? That's going to cost so much money. We're going to have to retrain our teachers. We're going to have to do all this stuff. And, they want these kind of standards in our school because there is a political focus on them. So, as far as the science standards, that's one thing, because you're not going to see too much political stuff in like the math standards.
Right.
They're not really politicized. The English standards we do see some things in there in some of the programs that have been brought into the schools.
What kind of things?
Well, for instance, I did a presentation in Seabrook this year, and in front of their school board, and I went through their English curriculum, and their English curriculum that they're using is called Wit and Wisdom. And if you go to Wit and Wisdom, let's just say you just Google Wit and Wisdom Tennessee lawsuit, you're going to see that parents in Tennessee filed a lawsuit against the state of Tennessee because of Wit and Wisdom. I think they filed it against Tennessee. I could be wrong about that. But they brought up, and if you read the lawsuit, which I did, if you read the actual lawsuit, parents are saying that their kids are being subjected to things like critical race theory or anti-racism. And so they're reporting that, that their kids are coming home, they're in emotional distress, because what that does to a child in a classroom is it puts a lot of pressure on the different races. So if you are, a Black student, you are a victim. You are the oppressed. If you are the white student, you are the oppressor. You are the, that you are the one responsible for slavery. You are responsible for this. So a lot of times these little kids don't understand this. And this is presented to little kids.
How old?
Oh, little, like elementary school.
Wow.
Elementary school. And in that lawsuit, some of the parents that are reporting this, they were reporting what their kids were coming home stressed out because, their teachers were making them feel, which could be coming from the teachers. It could be just becoming because they're teaching the actual curriculum that they're supposed to be teaching. And so, and I've seen this even in SAU 16, which is Exeter, Kensington, Kingston, trying to think all of the schools that are in that district stratum. They had bought a book, this was years ago, called I Am an Anti-Racist. I think that's what it was called, or something like that. And, I read the book. And so it puts these people into categories. So, you are in one of two boxes. You are in the oppressor box. So you walk away with the label as oppressor. I mean, that's what you're going to learn. You are the oppressor because of your skin color, and you are the oppressed because of your skin color. And that is the message. So if your kids are coming home and this is the kind of stuff that they're learning in their English class, don't be surprised. It's happening in some of our New Hampshire schools right now. They're using Wit and Wisdom in Seabrook. I think they're using it in Merrimack. I'm not sure where else. I haven't checked all the schools, but these are the kinds of things that they're learning in school now. And so a lot of these kids internalize it. And, it's not that they can't learn about slavery, they can't learn about all this stuff. But what's happening is, you're back then, years ago when you were in school, you learned about slavery, you learned about what people did back when it was happening. They didn't really say, oh, by the way, because you have white skin, you were part of that problem. They weren't tying that to that. You can understand the evils of slavery. You can understand how horrible it was. But also, they did it normally when you were a little bit older. You didn't put this on, a fourth grader who doesn't understand all of the intricate details behind this. And so those are the kinds of things that, again, I'll get parents saying, what's going on? And then I say, well, let's take a look at what they're doing in the classroom. Let's take a look at the curriculum. Let's take a look at this. As far as Seabrook was concerned, they had some school board members who said, would you take a look at what we're using and do a presentation before our school board? And I did that. Has anything changed? No, not really.
How was it received?
I mean, the people who are open are very interested. But there's a lot of people that do not care, that have absolutely no problem with pushing a critical race theory, anti-racist belief system on these kids. They don't care. They like it. They want it. They think that you're trying to whitewash history. And I always say, well, but Condoleezza Rice was interviewed on The View several years ago, and she did an amazing job. They asked her about that. They said, what do you think about these schools teaching this critical race theory kind of thing? And she just gave such a great answer. She said, I was brought up in segregated Alabama, and her parents just said, those are those people problem. You're going to succeed. And they gave her this mindset that she could overcome and that she can succeed. And clearly she did. And so, she wasn't labeled as that oppressed victim. You're not going to go anywhere in life because of your skin color. And she basically said, I don't want my children also to be blamed for what has happened in history. And so
they're children.
Yeah. And so this is the kind of mindset that you have going on in public education right now. And I thought she did a brilliant job of explaining why this isn't good for the psyche or the mental health of our kids. Doesn't mean that you don't teach history, doesn't mean that you don't, that you skip over these subjects. But number one, let's wait till they're a little older and can understand that, this was happening back, when slavery was in the South and it was legal. And we're not going to internalize it and blame ourselves for it.
What do you think is an appropriate age to start teaching kids that?
I think it depends. I consider myself an extremely sensitive person. So I understand that's what some of these kids feel at a very young age. I couldn't deal with, even as an adult, I'll see some things from the Holocaust or some things from that. And it's horrifying to think about, a slave getting hanged or in slavery at all. It's evil. I don't have any, let's be honest about it. But I just don't want these kids going in and feeling like they're somehow responsible. Yeah, you have to tell them. But I do feel like, I don't think we need to bombard them at such a young age. Let's wait till they get a little older into high school. And yeah, you can start off with some things maybe as a younger child, but we're traumatizing these kids. Somebody in New Hampshire, I remember her saying to me, that she was taking her daughter down to Boston, and her daughter was, in tears, blaming herself for slavery. This is a New Hampshire mother, and I think her daughter. I still have it because she even posted it on Facebook. I still have her quote. I screenshotted it, and I think she was in 4th grade, and blaming herself for slavery. And I can see when I look at some of the stuff, I'm going, I can see how some of these kids are going to, maybe not all of them, but you're just, even in the lawsuit with Wit and Wisdom, they're just basically saying some of this is acceptable, but can we do it at another age where they're a little bit older and not so young, because you are terrorizing them. They're becoming away emotionally damaged from what you're teaching them. And this might sound kind of strange to people. It sounded strange to me too when I first discovered this, because I'm thinking, what? But when you read the lawsuit, and I'm thinking, well, they had to take their kids to counseling. You had to take your kids to a counselor? What more evidence do you need that this is not age appropriate for these kids?
If you're distressing them, you're not educating them.
Right.
So how much influence does the Department of Education have over all of this? Does the Department of Education tell the states this is what your curriculum is going to be, or is it a state board state education board that decides this?
So there's something called Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and that replaced No Child Left Behind. And so during No Child Left Behind, states were required to develop their own state standards, and they can come up with whatever they wanted, good or bad, and there was a focus on state test scores. So that ended back in, I think it was 2017, and it was replaced with ESSA. So ESSA shifted everything. So now we have national standards. And again, they'll say you can come up with whatever standards you want. Now, again, this came in during Obama, so keep that in mind. And at that time, the Secretary of Education, in ESSA, it says the Secretary of Education has to approve all state plans. And if he doesn't approve state plans, we can withhold money. Well, you've basically said the federal government is going to run your state.
Exactly.
Because if you can withhold money, they're going to do whatever the federal government says. So that's in the 1,061-page document. And so all of this talk about we're going to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education, I look at this right now and I'm going, but you still have this 1,061-page federal law in our schools. And
Right.
It says that the secretary has to approve state plans. And it shifted focus away from academics to school culture. So if you actually read it, the focus is now on school culture. It's not on test scores.
How so?
Well, in the past, like No Child Left Behind, they were, if your test scores weren't here, there was a remediation kind of thing built in.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so now the schools are, we're going to evaluate you not on so much test scores, but we're going to evaluate you on all these other aspects. Graduation rates, the culture of the school, all of these things. Well, now when you have a Biden administration, what does that culture look like? When you have a Trump administration, what does that culture look like? So you can see the political influence coming in based on who's elected as president and who they appoint as U.S. Secretary of Education. So under Biden, we saw a lot of critical race theory. We saw a lot of this transgender ideology in schools. And, I'm a parent out here and I'm going, I don't like this. And the school administrator's going, well, but if they don't approve our state plans, they're going to withhold money. So we have to do everything that the federal government is basically requiring us to do without coming out and telling you that the federal government's running our schools. I mean, they're just not going to say that. But that's essentially what they're doing. And
that can basically change with every administration.
That's why Trump pulled back on a lot of this stuff. He pulled back on the transgender thing, and sometimes he was saying, "I'm going to withhold money." And they're, everybody's, on the other side's freaking out. How dare he withhold money? And I'm like, but Obama signed the law that said he can withhold money. He's the one who signed that law.
I didn't know that. Neither do they.
No, they don't. They don't know that.
So it's not permanent then.
I mean, it can change. It can change depending on administration. I don't think that eliminating the Department of Education is going to get the results that everybody would like just by eliminating it, because you still have this law in place. I don't know, you don't really hear about this law. You heard a lot about No Child Left Behind. You don't hear about this law, though.
But every individual school board is supposed to abide by what the Trump administration is putting into place. So
yes.
What are some of the tools available to parents if there's critical race theory or gender ideology being pushed on their child?
So now that he's pretty much said no to this, then what you have to do is you have to go to the State Board of Education, report it to them, and you can also report it to the federal government if you see examples of where they are pushing this stuff, and report it to them. And you just hope that they're going to do something in terms of withholding money. That's the way you get them to do anything. You have to withhold money.
Horrible way to run public education.
It is a horrible way to run public education, but that's the reality of it. So I'm not here to promote it one way or another. I'm just saying this is the reality. If you like that he's pulling the strings and saying, I'm not going to fund you because you don't like this stuff, you like it because he's in office. When Biden's in office and he's saying, I want you to put this stuff in your school and I'm going to give you all kinds of money to do it, and they're doing it, then you're like, I don't like that money part of it.
Bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Depends on who's in office.
Exactly. That's nuts.
Yes, it is nuts.
So New Hampshire's had a pretty good year as far as public education goes. We've got the Parental Bill of Rights, and we've expanded the EFAs. Some people are for it or against it. How do you feel about the EFA expansion?
So we have two school choice programs in New Hampshire. We have the scholarship and we have the EFA. And I was a big supporter of the scholarship program because the scholarship program, what I liked about it is companies would give to the scholarship organization and then they got a credit on their tax return. So the money never came into the budget, never was taken out of the budget.
Okay.
It was separate from what the state was doing. So yeah, there was a law, but the money itself never came into the state and was never distributed from the state. And so I thought that's a great idea because I know how politicians work. They want to control the schools with that money. Mm-hmm. So if we don't put the money in the budget, it never comes out, these people that want to control our private schools will not have that opportunity. So I was a big supporter of the scholarship program. When the EFAs came around, that money comes out of the budget. Mm-hmm. It comes out of the state budget. And I have warned and warned and warned till I'm blue in the face that because the money's coming out of the budget, going to these schools, the legislators will tie strings to that money. Mm-hmm. And that's how they control the private schools. And they do that by telling, by putting in law, they'll say, any child that, let's say, takes money to a Christian school, you now have to take the state test in order to get that money. Now, we don't have this in place right now. I'm just saying that this is the warning.
But this is the same thing as before we were talking about where it depends on who's in power.
Yes. So right now, they don't have to take the state test to get that money. But I've been warning these guys, if that ever happens, I withdraw all my support for EFAs. Mm-hmm. Because that's what's going to start controlling our private schools. Because what's the state test? The Common Core test. They want that money. These private schools are going to want that money because they're getting all these EFA kids. They're getting all this voucher money. And what's going to happen is they're going to say, now they're testing our kids with the Common Core test. We better teach Common Core because we want that money.
Now, these private schools, typically private schools, you get a better result as far as your child's education. Do you think a private school child would be able to pass a Common Core test?
I don't know that, but I know in other states that have done similar things with EFAs, Ohio being one of them. Ohio has a voucher program, and at first they didn't require the kids to take the state test, and then they changed it, and all of a sudden the Christian schools were adopting Common Core. Same thing in Indiana. Indiana, when Mike Pence was governor, they required the kids to take the state test. All of a sudden, I mean, the parents were up in arms. Like, let's say you had your kids in a private Christian school, everything's going fine. Now all of a sudden you're getting these voucher kids in, and now all of a sudden they have to take the state test, and now they find that their schools are changing up the curriculum to get that money, to keep that money flowing. I mean, I saw it in my own family. I saw it in my own family who lived in Ohio. And I had a niece that had to take her son out of a Christian school because I had warned her. I said, because she was like, I'm taking the voucher money, going to Christian school. Okay, great. Watch for this. Sure enough, they started requiring the test and they started aligning to Common Core in a Christian school. It's the way to control our private schools. They're not doing it in New Hampshire, but they tried it last year. A Democrat put in a bill to require testing of the state test on all EFA kids. And I blew a gasket and I contacted all the legislators and I contacted all of the parents and I said, you got to kill this bill because if this bill passes, I no longer will support an EFA in the state because I know that this is their ticket to controlling our private schools. So I consider myself somewhat neutral right now. I think it works right now. Is it perfect? No, it's probably not perfect. But the legislators know that they better make sure that this stays the way it is because if it ever changes, that I'm going to turn on them.
But they got to hold they have to hold the House.
They have to hold the House, yes. If they ever lose control, everybody's like, oh, if they lose control, the Democrats will wipe out this program. I'm like, no, they won't. They won't wipe out this program. They'll just take over the private schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal, and that's the UNESCO goal.
And how would that affect homeschool kids?
So we were really careful in New Hampshire, and I shouldn't really say we. The homeschool community, some of the people within the homeschool community were very careful to make sure that your basic homeschool family who's not taking any money would not be subjected to, let's say the law changes and they say if you're an EFA student and you're doing homeschooling, your kid has to take the test. The separate homeschoolers that's saying we're not taking the money, that would not apply to them. So they were very smart to make sure that they were carved out this section and that they're free from that requirement if that were to pass into law. So let's say that they put a string on that says all EFA kids have to take this test. And again, if you're in a private school and you're not taking EFA money, you wouldn't have to take the state test. But we know what it does to these private schools. They feel the need to align. I mean, I've even talked to some of the principals at some of these private schools, and I said, what are you going to do if this ever changes? What are you going to do? Because, yeah, you can defy it, or you can say, well, I'm not going to teach to that test. But that's their mechanism to control your school. And you have to be able to say, we're not caving. We're doing things the way we are doing. But, that's it didn't happen in Indiana and it didn't happen in Ohio. We saw those schools change. And so...
That's awful. Because, the whole point of using private school or even homeschool. So if you're homeschooling your kid and you're taking EFA money, you'll still be subject to that if that were to happen.
Yes, which is why many homeschoolers will not take that money because they know that eventually this could happen and they don't want any kind of regulation like that. And they want to make sure that they're separate so they don't have to fall with everybody else who takes the fall.
The propaganda against the EFA is very aggravating because they'll say that you're giving money to rich families, and a lot of people just can't afford $10,000 a year for private school, and that's probably conservative.
Yeah. I mean, there are other reasons that people will oppose it. There are other people. I don't really get into the weeds on that because
it just drives me nuts that I pay quite a bit in property tax.
Yeah.
And I'm paying for public schooling.
Yeah.
We don't use the public school.
Yeah. Yep.
And we get better results out of our child. When your kids go into public school, they come home a lot more distressed. And I've been told, well, you got to worry about socializing your kid, which we do socialize our kids.
Yeah.
We just don't do it through the public school system.
Right.
And
we
don't want them in a atmosphere of where there's tribalism going on.
Yes.
Essentially. And I've seen nothing but good results. Yeah. And the younger kids learn from the older kid that's going through the private school, homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And the data shows that kids are better off private homeschooled and through private school.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Like, I've talked to Glenn Cordelli about it, which he doesn't call it a voucher. He calls it
right.
What is it called? Education Freedom Account.
Yeah.
It's not a voucher, is what he says. And
they have been very careful. They do know the risks, and they did beat down that bill last year. And it was funny because it was actually my state rep out in Northampton that put that bill in, and I called her up and said,
What did she say?
We had a long talk about it, and I do appreciate that she at least listened to me. She withdrew that bill.
Oh,
she
good.
withdrew it, which, I do appreciate. It's really Democrat against Republican when it comes to this thing. Let's be honest with you. It's very partisan. And she's a Democrat, and I at least appreciated that she listened. I mean, they had a lot of these kids that had left the public school come in and speak and talk about why they left their public school. And my whole point, I kind of stay out of the weeds on the program itself. And what I say instead is, and what I say basically to her or anybody else listening is, why don't we focus on fixing the public schools? And then that way you don't have to worry about these kids leaving and going somewhere else. If you would fix the problems, then you take away the desire to leave. You're basically trying to force these kids to stay in a system that is not working for them, instead of saying, let's wipe out. You're so focused on stopping this program. And if you would focus on going to the State Board of Education and saying, for instance, let's fix our standards, let's elevate the curriculum. That's one thing you can do. Bullying is a huge issue in our public schools. A lot of the kids that come in and speak about why they're taking this non-voucher, whatever you want to call it, EFA, why they're leaving the public schools is because they're relentlessly bullied. I deal with these parents. I deal with these schools. It is an absolute joke to some of these schools how they handle the situation. It's almost like they don't care that there are bullies bullying these other kids in these schools. Some of them. I'm certainly not talking about all of them, but I have dealt with parents that are just so frustrated. They want their kids to stay in school. I mean, this is where they want their kids going to school. You are taking somebody who wants their kid in your school, and you are literally forcing them out the door because you refuse to deal with these kids. Or let's say that you've dealt with them, but it's not working. And I'm looking at this going, how difficult is this to deal with a 6th grade girl? How difficult is this?
What do you think the root cause of the bullying is?
I think that there could be many reasons. I think sometimes it's just power and control over maybe another kid.
Do you think it's worse than it has been in the years prior?
Yeah, because I don't think that there's really any incentive for these schools not to, to stop it. For instance, we have a law in place, and it says that if your school neglects to deal with, or is neglectful in the situation, then a parent can sue. It has to reach a level of neglect. That's obviously a legal term. So you have to be, neglecting the situation, and then a parent can sue the school. So what these schools do is they do the minimal. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And you're supposed to report it to the Department of Education if it's bullying incident. So what they do is, well, it's not bullying. It's harassment. It's, they'll label it everything but bullying. So
what's the difference between bullying and
harassment?
That's what
I said. I'm like, you're playing word games, so you don't have to report it to the department. I mean, it's just amazing the hoops that they'll jump through rather than deal with the 6th grade girl that's tormenting the other girl. It's like, if you guys would just deal with her, then you wouldn't have to, then the parent leaves. I've seen parents, again, we're trying to figure out how to stay in the school, how to deal with the situation. And a lot of times these parents say, I'm fed up. I don't tell them to leave. I never tell a family to leave because that's not my role. That's not what I feel is I should ever do, because this is their kids. If they want their kids in a public school, they're paying, they should get the best. And that's up to them.
Did you keep your kids in public school?
No. Not one day. Well, I take that back. My oldest son, while he was on a waiting list to get into a Catholic school, we put him in for, I think, 1 year. I think he was in kindergarten or 1st grade. And then after that, nope, absolutely not.
Never.
No. My husband and I went to public schools. I believe in public schools. I think that I know the potential that they have. And had they lived up to that potential with my own kids, they would have been in a public school. I'm not against them. It's just that I knew that they weren't going to get the best, and I was looking for the best. And that's exactly why I did all this, is to really research this and figure out what was best for my kids. And, I know, I have a older brother who has a PhD in chemistry, and we both went to public schools. And it's almost impossible to see an American student walk across the stage and get a PhD in chemistry today. They're from foreign countries. Same with math, same with science. They're coming from India. They're coming from the other countries where they've taught them quality math. And I know what we could do because I know the potential that's out there because I have one in my own family that could go through a public school his entire life and then go on to college and attain that level of knowledge and a degree. And so there's no excuse that our public schools cannot be doing that today, but they're not.
So what's the biggest obstacle?
I think right now in our state, it's all in Kelly Ayotte's hands. Is she going to elevate the academics in the state? And I don't mean putting together a commission to rewrite standards and come up with garbage. I'm talking about really finding, math professors at St. Anselm, English professors, our top teachers in the district or in the state, not focused on politics or wokeism, that's really focused on quality literature, quality math programs, and really convene together that kind of a committee to elevate the standards, which would elevate the curriculum and tests. She has all that power that Sununu just basically tossed in the trash can. I can't even believe that he did nothing to help our public schools in the capacity that he had, because we saw what Governor DeSantis did. He laid it out. He showed the country what you can do if you have that kind of leadership. And, this would be the task for the commissioner, who we have a new commissioner in the state, Caitlin Davis. This would be her task. But this is not something she can do on her own. She's got to have the backing of the governor. So when we had Frank Edelblu in office, who was controversial in his own right, he caught a lot of fire. And so, I would tell him all the time, we need to do this. We need to do this. Well, if he doesn't have the backing of the governor, he can't do this on his own. He's got to have the leadership. It's got to come from the top. So, I did bring it up to Kelly on a campaign stop one time. And, she listened. And I don't know if this is on her radar screen, but I hope it is. I hope she realizes, and I brought it up that, they did it in Florida. We didn't do it in New Hampshire. I don't know why. But after 15 years of stagnant scores, pathetic scores, could you do something to help these kids in our public school? I mean, whether you put your kids in a public school or not, it would be nice if they graduated literate in these subjects.
What is the proficiency rate right now?
Well, that would be school by school.
Okay.
You can go to the Department of Education in New Hampshire and you can pull up iPlatform. So if you go to their website, you would look for iPlatform, and then you would look for your school district. And it's not super easy to find. These websites, sometimes you're like, how the heck do I find this stuff?
I've only seen charts. So like I said earlier, when I go to look for myself, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, you look for iReport. There's an iReport and there's an iPlatform. And I think it's under iPlatform. I don't think it's under iReport. And then you click on it, and then you put in your school, and it pops right up. So it's once you get to that iPlatform, then it's easy to find. But if you don't know to go to that iPlatform or iReport, you may not be able to find it very easily. And then you look at your school, and it's got all kinds of information. Like it'll say average pay for your teacher. That can be from I've seen teachers paid in the 60s. To teachers paid in the 80s, depending on what school district you're in. Proficiency scores on general for high school in math is around 50% proficient. Could be lower. The lower grades, like fourth grade and eighth grade, that's going to vary from school to school, district to district. But, for instance, like I'm in SAU 21, Seabrook kids are doing horribly. I'm in Northampton. The kids are actually doing pretty well on state exams. And we're in the same district.
So if the proficiency rate, let's say it's 50%, does that mean only half the kids can read?
Or meeting the standards of that test.
Meeting the standards of that test.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what is what should it be at? Like it should be 100%?
Well, in Northampton, we're like at 80%.
Really?
So yeah, I think in our Northampton again is the elementary and middle school. The high school's Winnicott. So the Winnicott's not doing like Winnicott, like in math, they're doing like in 30%. But in our lower school, where our kids are actually doing well. Yeah.
So in Winnicott, it's at 30%.
Yeah.
So only a third of the kids can pass the test. So how does that relate to graduation rates?
So we have a law in New Hampshire, and it's really interesting because, sometimes the schools will, we have set this high graduation rate. And I'm like, yeah, but it's illegal to drop out. So they passed a law several years ago that basically made it illegal for you to drop out of school. So your graduation rates are going to be pretty high.
Uh-huh.
And it has nothing to do with what you've done in the school. It has everything to do with the fact that lawmakers made it illegal for you to drop out.
So they're just passing kids?
Yeah.
How can they get away with that?
Well, it's going to depend on what a parent's going to go in and say to the school. And, if their kids are not doing well, they can go in and they can say something, but sometimes it's like talking to a brick wall. I mean, I've asked for things in my own district, and I get looked at like I have three heads. For instance, when I lived in Bedford, I asked them to put the check registry on the school website. I wanted to see what they were writing in checks every month. And they did it. They did it within a couple weeks. And I've asked in SAU 21, where I live, to put the check registry online, and they don't do it. So it depends on what kind of response you get. So a lot of parents will be like, look at all these kids leaving the schools for these EFAs and all this stuff. Have they changed anything up? No, they don't care. They really don't care. It's so interesting because if they cared, they'd be doing something about it.
Well, spending's gone up, that's for sure.
Spending goes up.
But you don't see any results.
Mm-mm.
I don't understand how that's acceptable.
I don't either. Because too many parents are complacent. Too many parents sit on the sidelines. The ones that care have already pulled their kids out. So the rest of them, they don't want to criticize their school. They just want to
go along to get along.
Go along to get along. And I'm just like, okay, well, that's your kids. So I'm here to help if you want help. Like I don't bother people that don't want help. I'm not going to mess around and force something on a school or force something on parents if they don't want help. But if they want help, I'll help them.
How many people have you helped?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. And most of the time they'll go somewhere else. Most of the time they figure out that I can't get where I'd like to go. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they realize, like I said, the one parent in Merrimack, she had homeschooled her kids and then, put them back in the public school, didn't like the math. And I said, send them to the Russian School of Math afterwards. So she does that. So she's not homeschooling and she's still keeping them in the public school and just takes them to tutoring after school. And, they figure out what's going to work for their family. And, I try to provide options like, okay, here's what you can do. Let's figure this out. Yeah.
What's your view on the appropriate size for a classroom?
So, there's so many factors in that I don't know if you can put a number on it. I think in an average classroom, it can be 20, 25 students. The problem with today is the schools have pretty much abandoned consequences for kids with bad behavior. And I say that in general. Again, I'm sure that there's some good schools out there that are, doing well. But for instance, in Keene, about 2 years ago, they had a whole bunch of teachers resign. And the teacher said it's because behavior's out of control. Behavior's out of control. You're not doing anything to stop the behavior problems, and we're resigning. And it caught attention. It was made the news out there. They had a big meeting with the parents, and it really boils down to leadership. What is the leadership willing to do in a school to correct these problems? And clearly they weren't doing enough. Clearly these teachers felt like this was out of control, and I totally understand it. I'm with the teachers on this. I can tell you that this is a problem. And so, we've tried to move in the direction of let's get these kids help. And so we've started these programs, social emotional learning. We're going to try to change their behavior, make their behavior better than what it normally is. And so teachers sometimes will feel a little relief because they've got these other people working with these kids on their behavior issues. But the bottom line is, in many cases, is that the consequences have been eliminated. Now it's all a mental health issue. And so in Keene, wasn't that long ago that the school board voted to bring back consequences. Isn't that interesting? We're going to bring back expulsions and suspensions.
They got rid of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is a mental health problem. This isn't a kid just pushing boundaries now. We've got to treat these all like they have mental health issues. So you've got this 3-tiered system. It's called the multi-tiered system of support for behavior. And on the bottom, you've got the social emotional learning. You deal with all kids. You put them in all these SEL classes where you're doing behavior modification, where you're dabbling in mental health, and every child is subjected to this. Now, I have parents who've said, I'm not doing this with my kids. No social emotional learning. The problem is some of this is embedded into the math curriculum, believe it or not. I found it in math curriculum. Yeah, so watch out. You can say you don't want your kids participating, but the math program on your kid's iPad may have an element of SEL in it. And so it's a way for that vendor to collect behavior data on your kids. These parents have no idea. When I tell them, they're like, what? So now you got all the kids doing this SEL stuff. And again, they're collecting mental health data on your kids. That's why a lot of parents are saying no to it.
It has something to do with that. There was a video that went viral just last fall. I think it was last fall, where they were asking, I think, 11-year-old kids really weird questions down in Massachusetts.
No, that is the youth risk behavior survey.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little different. So then if that doesn't work, and let's say the kid's still creating problems, then the second tier is you go see the school counselor. And so now you're talking to the school counselor. They're trying to counsel you into behavior modification things. And again, what I call mental health treatment. I mean, some of this really goes into mental health treatment. So then the third tier, this is the top tier, if they're still misbehaving, now we're going to send them to a provider outside the school district. So in Seabrook, for instance, they have the Seacoast Youth Services. So in our budget last year, I saw that there was a $100,000 increase in the budget to send kids to Seacoast Youth Services. So they were upping the budget $100,000, and it said to avoid suspensions. So now we're going to pay for the kids who probably should have been suspended to now go to this third-party provider to work on their mental health. So when you see behavior problems in the school, because we don't know if that works, I even asked people in my own district. I went to the school board meeting and I said, show me where this is working. Show me evidence where this is working, because we're spending another $100,000. Crickets. Again,
sounds like feel-good policy.
It's a lot of feel-good policy, but where's the evidence it works? So they'll use, new age kind of mental health approaches to these kids versus consequences. So this is what we saw in Keene. In Nashua, teachers have gone to the school board and said, behavior's out of control. You guys have to do something about this. And I'm trying to think what other schools, like there's, you got to get a teacher that has some guts, because a lot of times these teachers, they know that they're going to get canned. They're going to become a target for elimination.
From who?
From the administrators. You don't dare criticize your administrators if you're a teacher working in a school district. That's why the Keene teachers were on their way out. They were leaving. They were resigning. They had nothing to lose. They were leaving. But for a teacher to go in, so the teachers just basically quit. They've a lot of them have left the teaching profession.
There was a video of a teacher from Wolfboro recently that was
right.
online.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, and let me tell you, the fact that he got up there and spoke.
So that was pretty.
That's huge. Every parent in that district should be having his back. Because you're just not going to find a teacher who's willing to do that. And I can't really say that I blame them. Their life is going to become miserable and they're going to be driven out of the school district. So they know what's coming after that. Oh, yes. You don't dare do something like that. These teachers know. And I hear from them all the time. They call me up confidentially. I never share their name. Confidentially, they will tell me. I mean, I've even had teachers leave a district, and I said, would you go back and talk to the school board and tell them all the problems that you faced? And I've been told, no, Anne Marie, because I'm not at that school, but I'm still in the education field, and I can't have my name out there, because if I go apply for another job at another school or do, something in the education field, and I was the person who spoke out against the school, those other administrators won't hire me.
Well, the people that make these policies sound like the same people who want to replace cops as social workers. You know?
Yes.
Send a social worker off to a domestic.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I mean. I kind of connect the dots for everybody so that they know, where this is all coming from, because most people don't know any of this. They don't know any of this. Like the parent that sued Manchester, I don't know if you're familiar with that case. She sued Manchester because her daughter was using a male name at school. And so she said, went to the teachers and said, what's going on with this? Because I found papers in her book bag with a different name on it. And they were like, well, we can't tell you. Because it's in policy that we can't tell parents, if a student changes their, name at school from one gender to the next. She sued the school. She did lose that case, but she's a public school teacher.
Oh,
Most
really?
people have no idea. She is a public school teacher in a different school district. She lived in Manchester, but teaches in another district. So a lot of times, and her name's not out there. They kept it, because of the daughter, they kept it sealed. But I know her because I got her the attorney. But people have no idea that a lot of these teachers, some of them can be pretty radicalized. That is true. But a lot of them are just going into class trying to do a good job. And this is all the things that we talked about today. You gave them Common Core math to teach this garbage, and they're looking at this going, this isn't anything good. Some of them think it is, but many of them realize it's garbage. But what are they going to do? They don't have much of a choice. You've set them up basically to fail.
How many teachers what's the percentage of teachers do you think that are driven by like a left-wing ideology that are teaching kids in public school?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's as much as people would like to think. I think most people go into teaching for the love of actually trying to help kids. Mm-hmm. I think most of them, even if they're maybe not voting conservative or Republican, I think most of them pick this profession for the right reasons. And so, when we go after teachers, when we come after them and attack them, I don't take that approach. I don't like that approach because I know what they've been handed. I know that many of them don't like this. I know that they have no choice in some of these things. I know that if they could speak up, they would. And then I do know that there's some vocal ones that are pretty radicalized. And, it might be one or two teachers in an entire school. Well, they don't speak for all those teachers. So they tend to, they put the flags up, they speak up. You kind of know who it is.
Yeah.
And normally it's not an entire school system.
I don't think it's an issue in the elementary schools where I'm at.
Yeah.
My son did go to 2 different elementary schools, and I never had any issues with any of the teachers that were in the schools. Never really worried about it, but I did worry about, as he got older, where he's going to go from here. And that's pretty much one of the reasons why we decided to homeschool. I know he was having some trouble with just the usual I guess it's tougher to say a young kid has stress, but they come home distressed.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a good thing.
Yes. And I see where it's coming from. Again, going back to the mental health and the SEL stuff, there's, instead of taking them out for recess and letting them run around and have fun and making it a joyful, school day, they're focused on, their mental health and, are you depressed? Are you anxious? And
they're cooped up in a class.
Maybe I wasn't, but now that you've suggested it to me, well, gosh, maybe I am. Maybe I am anxious. I mean, I've had parents tell me my kid's coming home saying that they're depressed. I don't even understand where this is coming from.
They don't know what depressed is.
Because it's been brought up in class.
Yeah.
And I'm going, they just planted a seed.
So with that woman in Manchester who her kid was coming home with a different name, that is basically where the parental bill of rights comes in, right?
Yes. Because at that Supreme Court hearing, and I was there for it, at that Supreme Court hearing, the attorneys for Manchester basically said, well, if they don't like it, they can go somewhere else. And it was really boiling down to what parents give up when they put their kids in a public school. This was the conversation between the attorneys and the Supreme Court justices.
But didn't they just have to pass a law that made it, I think it was one of Glenn Cordelli's laws, that made it so that you could put your kid in a different public school? Like you could you could choose to put them in a different district?
So that just passed.
Yeah.
That was actually Senator Victoria Sullivan's bill.
Okay.
And so, yes, you can transfer within public schools within your district. And so that just passed, and we're looking at how that's playing out right now. Like in my own district of SAU 21, I've got a Seabrook parent that wants to move her child to Hampton Falls, which is within SAU 21, and the superintendent just turned her down saying, oh no, Seabrook is a separate district in and of itself, and so is Hampton Falls. And now I've talked to Victoria Sullivan about this, and I'm like, Victoria, they're telling me that they can't switch within our district, and she said, that's wrong. So now we're waiting on a technical advisory from the Department of Education, which would come out of Diana Fenton's office. She's the attorney for the Department of Ed in New Hampshire. And I've even reached out to her and I said, Diana, I need this technical advisory because I've got these schools superintendents telling these parents that they can't move. And I check the website all the time. But yes, they should be able to move to another school within their district. So they're basically saying, well, yeah, Manchester, you can do that because you can move to different schools within Manchester. It's all one district. But they're saying out where I'm at, SAU 21, well, but Seabrook is separate from Hampton Falls. So they can't switch.
With that lawsuit, those lawyers are saying that they could do that. But could they do it at the time?
They couldn't at the time, no.
So why would the lawyers say that they could?
They were just basically saying, get your kid out of here if you don't like it. That's essentially what they were saying. They weren't saying do it under this new law. They were just basically saying, if you don't like what's going on in Manchester, take your kid somewhere else. And that made headlines the next day in the Union later because they were like, couldn't believe that the attorney said that.
So now that the Parental Bill of Rights is passed, there was a post that I saw about it might have been an administrator. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but they were saying, well, 90% of all of this was already in law.
Yes, and that is true.
And I think I commented on there and said, well, good, we'll follow the other 10%. And you said that the problem is that they weren't following the 90% to begin with. Right.
Yeah. I have turned many schools in for not following the law. We have a component. We have the Department of Education that can revoke teaching credentials, if they're not following the Code of Ethics or the Code of Conduct. And within the Code of Ethics and the Code of Conduct, it says that you have to follow the law. So I have turned many teachers in for maybe not following the law. And normally they get a warning and then they get their credentials revoked if they do it again. So you have to, there's not a lot of teeth. There's not a lot of teeth in the law is what I mean. So you have to...
Before or after?
Anytime.
Oh.
Anytime. So, I have to go after their teaching credentials. So I have to be able to say that they violated the law and here's who violated it. Like, for instance, I got a message the other day that 2 Hooksett school board members voted against a policy that puts this parental bill of rights into policy. They don't have a choice. It's state law now, but they voted against it. Now, I think the policy passed because they were outnumbered, but we had 2 school board members in Hooksett vote no on adopting a policy that follows state law. They don't have a choice. You have to follow state law. You have to follow federal law. I think, like you said, I think they adopted the policy, but you might get a rogue person saying, I'm not following this law.
I'm sure you will.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the extra 10% that has been implemented as far as
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what all they added to. I'll have to go back and really look at that 10%. Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember. I'm sure I probably looked at it at the time that they were drafting the law, because at that time I had said, you need to add this, you need to add this, I want any mental health data that's shared, I want that to have parental consent. I think I told them they need to put that in the law. I don't think they added it, but this next session, I have a legislator that's going to put this bill out there that parents need to consent on something like that. They wanted one law that basically listed all of the current laws, and that's basically what they were putting together. And like I said, they added, I think, a little bit to it. So, yeah.
So basically the way it is now, though, you have a right to know what's going on with your child. They can't withhold information from you when it comes to your kid.
Yes.
It's crazy that they could before.
Yes. Makes no sense.
So what do you think the future of education looks like in New Hampshire in the coming years?
I don't think it looks good.
No?
No, I don't. Unless Kelly Ayotte decides to work on the standards, that would be huge. That would be a big plus. I think that this focus on mental health in schools, I think that people are sold on it because it sounds good, but I think that we are seeing a lack of consequences, number one. Number two, there's a lot of information on your kids being collected on their mental health and behavior, and that information leaves the school without your knowledge or consent.
Where does that information go?
Vendors, for instance, they'll have, like I brought up social emotional learning, there's SEL vendors. So while you are doing all your SEL in your classroom, you're inputting all this data into your program, your SEL program. So all that information on these students is going into the program, and now it's going to the vendor. And the vendor collects all that information.
And what does the vendor do with it?
That's a good question. Well, some of them have been sued for sharing that information.
Really?
Yes.
Do they share names too with the kids, or
Power School was sued? You hear about Power School?
No.
Okay. So Power School is in the schools, and they had a breach back. I want to say not quite a year ago. They had a breach, and right before the breach, there was a lawsuit from parents saying, "Power School, you're taking all of the data that you're collecting on our kids, and you're selling it, and you're giving it away, and we never consented to this." And I shared that with my own superintendent, and I said, are you using Power School? Because there's a lawsuit out here, and they're giving away this information. And she kind of laughed it off. Oh, Anne Marie, we're fine. We're doing this. We're all good. And I'm like, I don't think you're good. You have a lawsuit saying that this is being done. And don't you know, after she laughed it off, 2 months later, Power School announces a humongous data breach.
Wow.
And I just sat back and I'm like, what's it going to take for you guys to take this stuff seriously? What is it going to take? And I'm like, there's no part of privacy protection when it comes to these vendors in our school. Nothing. Read their privacy policy. It's a joke. They can share information under these circumstances. We keep everything private. That's how they'll start out. Except we can share with this, and we can share under these circumstances. Parents never know, never consent.
I've never even heard of vendors in the school.
Yes. They're on the kids' Chromebooks. So when they open up a Chromebook, that's the vendor, that math vendor, that science vendor. But again, okay, it's one thing when they're collecting math data. It's another thing when they're collecting SEL data or behavior data or mental health. That's why when I said SEL is in the math program, well, now your math vendor is collecting mental health data on your kids through their math curriculum program. And what do they do with it? If I was a betting person, I would say they're selling it.
Right.
And you're never going to know. And then they're giving it away too, or they're sharing it.
Who would buy that?
Oh, anybody. And that data is gold. That's where they're making their money. They're not making the money off of this going to the school. They're making money off of the data. Mm-hmm. And that data loophole came about in 2017 when President Obama removed the privacy protections that were in place. There was privacy protections that said you can't share this data without parental consent. And he removed that from the federal law. Obama opened up that loophole.
In 2017?
2017, I believe it was, yes.
Trump was president then.
Oh, maybe it was 2016.
Okay.
It could have been it was right before he came into office.
The transition.
Yeah. So, right before, if you Google FERPA, Obama, changed the law or something. He did it. He didn't do it through Congress. He just kind of, I think, executive ordered that, or however he did it. But
with the Department of Education, can they do that do a lot of things like that through executive order?
They did. I mean, because at the day it happened, I got a call from an attorney down in Washington, D.C., one of my colleagues down there, and he said, Anne-Marie, he just changed the FERPA law. Everything is now open for sharing. Wow. Yeah, and then not just that, they can share it from let's say that, because the federal government's collecting a lot of this information too. So it's not just the vendor. The federal government, through the state, is collecting a lot of this information on students. Now it can be shared with the Department of Labor. So the ultimate goal, it was to share this information. So when you go to apply for a job, your kids' information now pops up, and now future employers can access this information. That's the ultimate goal of all of this. To share it and sell it for the vendors, for the federal government to share it with the Department of Education, and then eventually you'll have blockchain, you'll have these digital portfolios that, this is all coming together. You can see it being laid out. He changed the law. All the states, when Common Core came out, there was something called Race to the Top. All the states got money to set up identical databases. It was forbidden to come up with a national database. So what they did was they gave money to every state and said, we want you to set up the identical database. So they basically set up a de facto national database so they can all share the data. So all of this information going on these kids that are in public schools, I mean, I tell parents, I would not want my child in a public school today. So you say, what's the future of public education? There's your future right there.
That's dark.
It is.
So you don't tell anybody what to do with the kids when they do talk to you. You just could advise them on the policies and
tell them the truth
and what their options are.
Yes. And then they can decide what they want to do with their kids. Nope. They don't tell them, take your kids out, remove your kids. And many have taken their kids out. I've worked with them and they've taken their kids out, but it's been their decision to do that.
Yeah. I think it's worked well for us. And I think that the problem, the societal problem is that not a lot of people can just have a stay-at-home mom, one parent. We live in this world where everybody has to work a full-time job, at least. I know that there's some parents that the father works 60 hours a week and the mom works two 32-hour week jobs.
Yeah.
So, and they have no time with their kids. Yeah. So then you got to think, well, maybe that's why there's such a problem in school with behavioral issues, because who's parenting the kids?
Yeah.
They're just going to school for essentially daycare.
Yep. But
we're not at a point where gets really big.
The long-term goal is to have kids go to the Y, sit in a room with their computer, and have a facilitator walking around that room. Mm-hmm. And the kids that get an actual teacher are the special ed kids, 504 IEP kids. They'll go to school, they'll get an actual educator, but the long-term goal is to get these kids out of the public school system into, like the Y or somewhere where they're, and you say, what's the purpose of that? The purpose of that is to make ed technology money. It's all about profits. It's all about money for them. They are trying to change the model of schooling, and so they can get in on the money, which they already have with the Chromebooks and all of these vendors. So they're already making the money, but that's the ultimate goal, is to remove the teacher from this classroom. And I know this because we've seen the documents. They were doing this in New York. Bill Gates is one of the people behind it, and he was working with Governor Cuomo at the time. And there's a document. It's called Education Reimagined, and you can see the people who've signed off on this. Head of the teachers union signed off on this, and they spell it out. And so you can see in New York that this is where they were heading before he resigned. So this is coming. This is what they're going to do eventually, is your kid's not going to have a teacher. They're just going to have a facilitator. And, it's all about learning off the computers.
But what kind of a job can you get? Like, how does that prepare kids for the future?
I mean, I don't think they really care. And I've heard some people say, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. Look at, AI. And I'm like, if it's Common Core, it's still dumbed down. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's coming from AI. I don't care if they're sitting in front of a program. They're learning Common Core math off of their Chromebook right now, and it's not doing anything great for them. So I don't care if it's coming through AI. I don't care if it's coming through a teacher. I don't care if it's coming through whatever. It's still all dumbed down. So you're missing the point about improving the standards, the tests, and the curriculum. And then I still would want a teacher, because I've tutored kids in math before, or even my own kids. And I'll say something like, I'll do the problem with them, and I'm like, did you understand that? And their heads will shake yes, and you can see on their face that they didn't get it. A human being can tell that. And I would say, you know what? Let me just show you that one more time, because I know you're getting it, but I think I need to just do this. So even,
I heard that a lot in school.
Yeah, you don't want to humiliate them, but they're like, oh yeah, I got that. And they're like, I don't think so. And so, a human being, a teacher, can tell that, and they can redo it and show them again.
COVID was a lot like that, where what you're talking about, where it was kids were just learning from a computer.
Yes. I think COVID was used as a way to really usher a lot of this in.
COVID was used to usher in a lot of things.
Yes. It was used to usher in the Chromebooks. We have to have kids on technology, because what if this ever happens and we have to shut everything down? I say go back to books.
Wasn't there a principal that got busted for actually accessing kids' webcams?
Yes. Yeah, I remember that when they were watching kids at home.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's right.
Yeah, I wouldn't want a government issued Chromebook anywhere in my house. I mean, they could access anything we have, really, but at least you can. So, yeah, that is
crazy.
Yeah. So if I was a parent and I wanted to just learn all of this, where do you start? Like, where's
I don't even know where you start. I would probably say go to Granite Grok, go look at me as an author listed there, and just start reading all the articles, because I put everything on there.
Okay.
I just figure, well, if I ever die, people can go, if they ever have a question, put it into their search engine, and I've probably written about the topic, and you can probably, So a lot of times I'll go back and find my old articles like that one and say, go read this if you really want to know about this.
Right.
So
is that what you is that where you post most of your publications on Granite Grok? Mm-hmm. Do you have any social media that people can follow?
I mean, my Facebook page, and then Granite Grok, it also gives my email address, so people will email me.
Okay.
And talk to them whenever Yeah, I get emails from people around the country sometimes asking me questions. I read something from you, and yeah, I get all kinds of crazy requests from people in different states that have read what I've written about. Like they'll do a search on something, like a topic, and an article pop up, and they're like, I read that article. I'm in this state, and I'm wondering about this.
What do you think the worst state is for education?
I don't know. I didn't look at the rankings that came out from the NAEP.
What do you think is the scariest state to be raising a kid in as far as education goes?
Probably California.
Yeah.
Probably California. But it's funny because they have a lot of Asian parents out there that have really driven some good reforms in California. Like they were doing this woke math, and a lot of the Asian parents are like, no. We want our kids in Algebra 1 by 8th grade, and we're not going to put up with this. And so they pretty much forced their hand back to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and you better make sure my kid's prepared. They're not taking this sitting down. I don't understand why more parents don't do that.
Well, with the amount of money that people pay for education,
You'd think they would.
Yeah, and parents, it sounds like parents really need to start banding together and informing themselves and start changing the way things are, because this is also how is our society going to look when our children are adults, and how much have they learned as children? Like we can't fail them, and it seems like public education is failing.
Yeah, it is.
I want to thank you for stopping by.
Sure.
And sitting down and talking. And anytime you want to come back, you just let me know.
All right.
And
we'll do it every once in a while.
Yeah.
Maybe some updates after the legislative session, and I can go over what passed and what didn't pass. And yeah, anytime. That'd be great.
So go on Granite Grok.
Yep.
And type in Marie Banfield.
Or scroll down to where it says authors, and then you can click on my name and then bring up these articles.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.